I think I need to tweet that out again. We're live right now, but we're going to wait a second for everybody to jump on in before we get going. I think I need to tweet that out again. We're live right now, but we're going to. All right. All right. About ready to roll. All right. Keith Niebuhr with Gators Online, joined by Corey Bender of Gators Online. And we're going to talk some Florida Gators football recruiting. And we appreciate everybody for stopping by. We're going to give you all the latest scoop on the positives, the negatives, everything we're hearing about Gators recruiting tonight. We'll start off with a few topics. Corey and I have written some things over the last couple of days, so we'll talk about those articles a little bit, and then we'll make sure we get to everybody's questions. But Corey, let's get started. You posted a story this afternoon, level of commitment, and you took for all the offensive recruits committed to the Florida Gators, and we decided, hey, let's tell everybody where we think things stand right now with each of these guys, because after a loss that by which Florida just suffered, the likes of which Florida just suffered, that's kind of one of the first questions people always ask. Hey, what does this mean for my team, and then what does this mean for my team's recruiting? So we're gonna talk about Corey's article there, but Corey, just in general, what would you say to people that are negative, that are down on Florida recruiting because of a loss to Kentucky? I personally don't think that one game is always that huge. Recruits are kind of looking for trends and things of that nature. But what do you tell fans that say, Corey, hey, look, I'm concerned. What my team just got blown out by Kentucky. What does this mean? How will this impact recruiting?
I would say this. I think if you honestly have been watching Florida football and you're being honest with yourself, I don't think many people saw this game as a surefire win for Florida. Definitely not surefire, but I know a lot of people didn't predict Florida to win this one. So I think overall it's not really too much of a surprise with me, and I think we all kind of entered this season knowing it's part of a rebuilding process. There's a reason why these recruits were kind of addressed that too. You talked to a lot of these recruits throughout the summer and the early fall that they've kind of went out. They've said themselves that, hey, 1 or 2 losses isn't going to steer me the other way. I'm not going to flip. I'm not going to do that. So I don't think anyone entered the season thinking, hey, Florida's going to win 10 games or 11 games. It's obviously always possible, but I didn't really expect that. So I think every year you somewhat go through this, especially after a tough win. I mean, after a tough loss, you kind of reassess everything. You kind of look at the commitment list. So to me, it's just part of recruiting, man. I mean, unless you're the Georgias or the Alabamas that have went undefeated in years past, Ohio State and schools like that, I think every school kind of goes through that loss throughout the season that you kind of reassess everything.
Yeah, if it was all about wins and losses, teams that are 500 every year would never move up the ranks. I mean, if that's all it meant. Some kids like the rebuild. Some kids like the fact that they may be able to come in and contribute early. So they're looking at a variety of things, obviously. There's a lot of pieces to the puzzle. Am I going to play early? Who's going to develop me? Which coaches am I closest with? And then obviously NIL is a big part of the situation as well. We're NIL is still super new, so we still don't know. Will that help schools in a situation where people are worried about the long-term future of a program, or will it hurt them? We don't know that. It very well could help. It very well could be that key ingredient that keeps people committed and signed. We will see. We don't know. Other schools have money too. Other schools, their collectives, their NIL deals, they all have good situations too. You're recruiting against the big boys of college football. But Corey, when does it become an issue? I'll let you answer that first. When do losses become an issue? One loss in itself, we agree, isn't catastrophic usually. But when does it become a problem, and why?
I think overall, Keith, we've talked about having trends, seeing a school lose 2 or 3 more in a row, or maybe losing 2 out of the last 3. And I think another thing kind of goes back, reminds me of the Oregon State game, the bowl game, getting blown out by a team, or seeing the team kind of quit on themselves, or seeing a team just not kind of missing that ingredient, missing that camaraderie together. You can kind of see other guys, kind of chirping at each other. That's not Florida, but that's what you kind of see over time with certain programs, where you start seeing it going one way and a coach loses a locker room. I don't see that at all, right now with the current Florida team. I know this roster really believes in Billy Napier, and I think one thing it's probably across the board with most people is, the play calling. I think that's one thing that has to get fixed over time. And, it's obviously been the hot topic, since last week. But I think overall, I think this weekend, when they play Vanderbilt, say if Florida loses this game, that's when you start to get worried. I think if Florida wins and they lose at South Carolina, depending on what the loss would be, I think it's probably a better way to put it. But it's going to be interesting. I think this stretch for Florida coming up in this middle of the schedule is really kind of going to determine the momentum in recruiting, in my opinion.
I'm trying to get caught up on some of these. We weren't going to get to questions yet, but one of the questions was that we think that Nasir Johnson, the 4-star defensive lineman, is big flip candidate. I don't at this time. I mean, you got to figure right now he's Florida's only true defensive line commitment. They can't afford to lose him. So we saw him at the Tennessee game, I believe, right, Corey?
Yep.
And you're going to see they were never going to slow down on him. You don't slow down on a guy just because he commits to you, but they were always going to keep recruiting him hard because that's such a priority position in the SEC. So we haven't heard any chatter, but keep an eye on a school like Florida State, which was recruiting him heavily when he committed to Florida. Keep an eye on a school like Georgia. They've got an ever-shifting board as well. If they miss on LJ McCrae and LJ McCrae picks Florida, let's say, then maybe Georgia says, all right, we need one more guy. Let's go lock in on Nasir Johnson, who being at Dublin, Georgia is just, a couple hours south of Athens. So, or not even that much. So, you always have to recruit through the whistle, we say. You got to recruit all the way to the end, whether you're winning or losing, by the way.
I think Kelby Collins is a great example of that. I mean, they reeled him in last cycle and they said, hey, we got you in the fold, but we got to keep recruiting against Alabama all to the end.
Now, let me answer my own question to you. When does it become problematic?
Yep.
And first of all, I know everybody's talking about play calling and all that. That's all we're hearing about right now. But we're not hearing about it from recruits. I haven't heard that at all from recruits. Mm-hmm. Recruits simply believe most of a team's failures, any team, is about execution. That to a man, that's what they almost always tell you, at least in public. Now, what are they thinking privately? I don't know. But I've never, not yet, heard one say anything about play calling. So it's kind of interesting how recruits and fans look at things a little differently now. But when does it become problematic? When do losses become problematic? They become problematic when the noise gets so loud that recruits' friends and family members and their high school coaching staffs are in their ear chirping about it. Well, let's look at this long-term stability of this staff or that staff, or where's this program headed? Where's it not headed? Are you still comfortable there if they have a losing record and all that stuff? So it's the noise in the system, as the great Ron Zook used to say. It does percolate down to the recruits. It does, absolutely. Now they're looking at Florida right now, and they're looking at 3-2, and they're saying, "Hey, they're 3-2." I mean, that's a winning record. That's not the end of the world. And fans are looking at it and saying, "Well, we're 3-2, but we looked horrible at Utah and looked horrible at Kentucky." But recruits tend to have a different set of eyes looking at things, different perspective. Remember, they are not all in Florida fans. Now, a guy like Kendall Jackson might be, a guy like Miles Graham might be, but most of the guys are not like that. They're open-minded looking at these situations. And look, I mean, LSU, they were a hot program at one point last year. Then they lost a few games at the end of the season. They've got 2 losses right now. And are their 2 losses better than Florida's 2 losses? I don't know that they are. I mean, they lost to FSU badly, and then they just basically gagged at Ole Miss. I mean, Florida's lost to 2 pretty good teams too. So who knows, right? All right. So
one thing I want to add too, Keith, about Nasir Johnson. I did speak with him today. He won't be in Gainesville this weekend. And it's funny. One of our Harrison Sanchez put he canceled our visit. It was going to UGA. I don't believe he actually ever set the Florida visit. He's kind of been expected at most of these games.
Who's that?
Nasir Johnson.
Okay.
Yeah. So I was saying this weekend, FSU and Georgia were schools made to look out for if he visits. Word is he's going to Georgia this weekend. So. That's something obviously to keep an eye on too.
Yeah.
So.
I mean, you just figure Florida can't afford to lose this guy at this point. Now, if you lose him, you're down to 0 true defensive linemen in this class. We have to keep pointing that out because, again, and I'm not suggesting Florida is going to lose him, but right now with 1 defensive lineman, 1 true defensive lineman committed, that's a little bit kind of precarious. And so you look at the commitment list and you say, well, wait a second, Amaris Williams is listed as a defensive lineman, but he's not. He's an edge in Florida's scheme. So, Kendall Jackson's another guy. Could he play along the defensive line? Sure, if he grows, but I think Florida projects him at the F position, so more of an outside linebacker, edge type, or even inside guy. So, it's 1 true defensive lineman, and it's Nasir Johnson. All right, Corey, first question or next question here. Ryan Montgomery timeline seems to be our top guy in 2025. A 4-star quarterback from, I think, Findlay, Ohio. Auburn's getting in the mix. He's going to visit there in the next couple of weeks, it looks like. Just as you and I were talking about, we felt like Florida was trending. You had great inside information that said keep an eye on the Gators. They're maybe emerging as the team to meet, but it's look, when players good, you're gonna have a lot of people coming after you. The good news is for Florida, he's visited Florida multiple times, Corey.
Yeah.
Ryan Montgomery.
100%. It's funny you said Auburn too, because his top 5 has been pretty fluid. Because his father actually gave me a top 5 a few days before they released it, and I believe it was Penn State was the one school that got inserted at the last second. So, and then Auburn wasn't in this top group either. So, at the same time, he wants to decide towards the end of this year, but Auburn coming into picture, I still think South Carolina and Florida are the schools we've been talking about the most with him. But with Auburn coming into the picture, you never know either.
Yeah, it's look, he's a top quarterback, and so they're going to have to recruit him and some other guys. Do they continue to maybe try to move up with Antoine Hill, the 4-star quarterback out of Georgia in the 2025 class? Do they maybe circle back to the kid? Oh gosh, I'm drawing a blank. The kid at Fort Myers, Bishop Borough, Carter Smith. Yeah, do they circle back to him? They were recruiting him heavily at one point. Then they kind of backed off a little bit. We'd heard reports that maybe some staffs weren't thrilled with how he threw during the offseason, but he's a heck of a player and a heck of a playmaker.
He's a hell of a year too, right?
Yeah, now. Exactly. And he's going to be playing in Tampa this week against Will Griffin. I believe that's who they play, right? Tampa Jesuit.
Yeah.
So another quarterback that Florida likes him. Yeah. All right. Mr. Bird says, hey, have any of you heard of any commits on Flip Watch? Not imminent Flip Watch. There's guys that you're concerned about. You're always concerned. Look, I'm a negative Nancy. And I think you need to be as a coach. I think you need to continually be on guys, whether they're committed or not, regardless of what they tell you, because all last week, Florida felt great about Amir Jackson, the 4-star tight end from Portal, Georgia. And they didn't think, I don't care what's being reported out there. They did not think up until late in the week that he was going to visit Auburn. They felt like, he's got a game Friday night in South Carolina. He's got to get home at 1 a.m. and then drive and, 4.5 hours to Auburn. He's probably not going to go. Well, they found out late in the week that he was going to be able to go to Auburn. He's now been to Auburn. He hasn't been to game to Florida yet. So you're thinking, okay, well, that's something to worry about. Well, it turns out now he plans to go to multiple Florida games in the next month or so. His coach told me that, he had a great visit to Auburn, but he didn't think that anything had changed with regards to his recruitment. Now we'll say, a few weeks ago, his same coach didn't think that he was necessarily going to visit other schools, and he has. So you're always having to work on kids. Think the situations change daily. There's probably a kid everybody's worrying about that is rock solid. And then there's probably a kid out there that nobody's worried about, and he ain't rock solid, okay? You just never know. We've had people asking us about Miles Graham. How solid is he? I mean, his father played at Florida. He goes to high school at Buchholz in Gainesville. I wouldn't think that that's a guy you got to worry about. But, you just never really know. That's recruit through the whistle. But in terms of Flip Watch guys, Corey, I think when you go down the list, I mean, Amir Jackson is somebody you have to watch. Again, these are not guys we think are going to flip. These are the guys we think Florida's got to, kind of keep pursuing. Now, Florida feels very good about keeping Amir Jackson in class. Jamonte Waller just visited Auburn this past weekend, too, for the Georgia game. And Florida feels great about keeping him in the class. But that's one of those ones. You've got Auburn coming in from the east, and you've got Ole Miss coming in from the north. And Ole Miss is having a pretty good season right now. And that was a school. Those are two schools you had to beat to land him the first time around. You knew they weren't going to stop recruiting him. So it's constant. And then your own team situation, as we talked about, changes week to week. If Florida starts winning, it's probably not a huge concern. If Florida starts losing and the noise gets loud and there's questions about the program and any other bad news comes out, and then it can become problematic. Here's an interesting one. Harrison says, look out for Amaris Williams. Ohio State is pushing hard. Well, we wrote about it. You don't have to tell me. I wrote about him. I got him I got him a couple, I guess a week and a half ago. And he said, look, Ohio State and Tennessee, by the way, that's a 4-star edge commit from North Carolina. Ohio State and Tennessee are still recruiting me extremely hard. I don't think I'm going to visit, but he didn't rule it out. He said he was about 75% sure he wouldn't visit other schools. Well, Florida's only got 3 more home games. You're thinking, God, I've never been up to Ohio State for a game. I've never been to Tennessee for a while. What the hell? I'll go to a game. Ohio State's defensive line coach has strong ties to the Tar Heel State. So, yes, absolutely, that's a concern. But, again, these Florida coaches, remember, they understand this. This isn't anything new to them. And, by the way, Florida's trying to poach other guys too, okay? Florida's working on
just how the game works.
That's how the game works. The game. What do they used to say on that show, The Wire, Corey? That's how I learned how it works in the city. The game is the game, right? And so Florida's trying to flip. Who is Florida trying to flip? Jeremiah Smith, the 5-star receiver from Ohio State. That looks like it's going to be difficult, by the way. He'll be back for the FSU game, we think. Florida's trying to flip DeAndre Robinson, a 4-star defensive lineman from Orlando Jones. Well, gosh, he shows up at Florida a couple weeks ago. You're thinking, uh-oh. Well, then he showed up at Texas last weekend, and now Texas, I think, feels pretty good about holding him.
And I think he's going back to Austin this weekend, too. I think.
Yeah, and now Florida thinks they're very much in that one, but you're continually recruiting people. Charles Lester, 5-star Florida State commit. I don't think they've had any real concerns about him. And then he showed up at Florida out of the blue. Now, I think both of our sources or the sources of both of us have said that's probably going to be a difficult flip, but you keep working on him. Here's another one, Jameer Grimsley, the 4-star Alabama cornerback commit. Florida has not given up on that. If anything, Florida's put the foot on the gas with them. Yeah. So you're trying to hold your guys, you're trying to hold off other schools, you're trying to go after other kids. What the recruiting class looks like right now, it probably won't look like on signing day in December, quite frankly.
And one thing about Amaris Williams, too, I did speak with him yesterday. He said he is going to go up to Columbus for a visit. Don't have the date exactly yet, but we mentioned him earlier on in the cycle, too, with Penn State being a school that was heavily in the mix in his recruitment before he committed. And that's obviously closer to home, too. And I think Amaris Williams, he's the one commit. If you haven't watched this film, definitely go watch the highlights. Like I said, I'm no expert scout. Like I said, that's all
for sure.
Yeah. But no, he's one guy that you watch the film. I think he's an outstanding player, versatile. So it's one guy out of state. You want to keep the guys in the Southeast, guys in Florida home, but he's one guy Florida definitely doesn't want to lose.
Yeah, Mr. Bird, you've already asked the question. We'll get to this one too. So what losses and record would make you scared for the 2024 class? I think once you start dipping into that losing record, because then it'd be 2 straight losing seasons. And here's the reality of the situation, guys. And by the way, Corey and I both know Billy Napier. And personally, we like the guy. He couldn't be any more friendly to us. Always goes out of his way to talk to me and Corey, right? Would you agree with that, Corey?
Absolutely.
Fantastic guy.
Yep.
But this is a business, right? This is a business. If Corey and I don't perform, it doesn't matter how nice we are. Now, we try to be nice to hope that if we ever get on the chopping block, they'll say, that Corey's a good guy. Wait, we can keep him around a little longer. But no, my only point with that is we can't really predict the future. But if you have 2 straight losing seasons, and this is why you don't want to have 2 straight losing seasons, you then sort of go into next season on the hot seat, right? I mean, let's just call it for what it is, right? And, having covered another SEC West school or another SEC school that was in the Western Division, head coach there that I personally liked quite a bit. Once he got on the hot seat, Corey, he never got off of it, and it impacted recruiting. And when Gus Malzahn got to Auburn, they were beating out Alabama and Georgia for guys like Carl Lawson, guys like Derek Brown, guys like Kerryon Johnson, guys like Jared Stidham, very good players in the NFL, guys that made it to the NFL. All right, very good players in the SEC. And then you get on the hot seat, or it's not even that you're on the hot seat. It's that you're perceived to be on the hot seat. And other schools utilize that. Now, that's before NIL. NIL could maybe save some people. But it's the perception that you're on the hot seat is the killer. All right? And so by Gus Malzahn, the end of his tenure, they were no longer beating out Alabama and Georgia for guys. Okay? They were beating out Arkansas for guys. Okay? They were beating out North Carolina State for guys. Programs that don't stink, by the way. But if you want to be in the upper echelon of the SEC, you need to be beating out Georgia and Alabama for some guys, right? And so once you get on the hot seat, you never seem to get off of it, quite frankly. And so that's what you want to try to avoid. And that's where it could be problematic, Mr. Bird.
One other thing, too, on that, Keith, just super quick I'll add is then you also have Florida State and Miami who are playing well this year.
That's right.
No. And then, I mean, UCF, I get it. I know they haven't been Power 5, but now they're in the Big 12. They're recruiting really well under, Gus Malzahn, who you just mentioned. They're getting a lot of Power 5 type guys. So with Florida, it's one of those years you kind of don't want to go through a rebuild just because what's out there with the recruiting landscape. But
I'm less concerned. I love the guys at UCF. I know a lot of those guys,
Yeah.
obviously. But, they lost that was a bad loss last week. And now they're looking at, you look at their schedule. Corey, you look at UCF's schedule, and it ain't no guarantee they're going to finish with a winning record. Yeah. Okay. So
I think the Florida State game, when Florida hosts Florida State, I think that is going to be such a big recruiting weekend from a momentum standpoint.
Well, here's the thing. I mean, Charlie Pell lost his first 2 games to Florida State.
Mm-hmm.
Got beaten 79 with a winless team, but played hard and played close at Florida Field. Could be a very similar situation to that game. Florida was unranked and didn't have a win, Corey. Now they'll be better than that this year. FSU was unbeaten after this was entering week 10. They didn't play the last game of the season, and they played in week 10. And Florida damn near upset FSU. Okay, a winless Florida team almost beat an unbeaten Florida State team. So that place behind me, that swamp, is a tough place to play. So in year 2, Florida then lost in Tallahassee under Charlie Pell in a game they should have won. And he told the team after the game, I promise you'll never lose to these guys again. And they didn't, as long as he was there. And so you got to show some progress. If they put up a fight against Florida State in that game, that would be every bit as significant. You'd love to win, obviously, but put up a fight. And I think they will at home. To me, Corey, still battling this cold or whatever it is. To me, the key game, obviously you got to win this week, right? You cannot lose this week. But you then go to South Carolina. That becomes the key game, because if you win this week like you're supposed to, you go up there and you win, you get to 5 wins. That means you're very likely going to have a winning record, okay? If you go up there and you lose that game, you're 4-3 with Georgia and at LSU coming up, right? You very well could be 4-5 after those games. You don't want to be in that position. The morale of the team, the chemistry, everything. You want to avoid that. You don't want to be 4-5 going into that blackout game, Jersey blackout game, Corey. Yeah. You want to be at worst 5-4, and putting up a fight in Jacksonville, putting up a fight in Baton Rouge. And by the way, everybody talks about how hard Baton Rouge is to play. Florida's won there many times. A lot of schools have won there. Okay. I don't think it's the home field advantage. It's great home field advantage, but I don't think it's the Swamp or Jordan-Hare Stadium, quite frankly. That's me. But you've got to win that South Carolina game. So to me, that's the key game for recruiting. You still want there to be energy in the stands for that blackout game. You don't want to go to the blackout game, which they're billing is this huge deal, Corey, to recruits, right? You want to be 4-5? You want to be 4-5 going to that game?
It's a good point that you mentioned that game as the one to kind of monitor, because I think a lot of people will say, hey, this Vanderbilt game, just because it's like they lost to Vandy last year, it's not a gimme game. But them being at home, I'd be shocked if they lost. Knock on wood, right? But with South Carolina, if it's a noon game or a night game afternoon, that place is a very hostile environment, a very tough place to play.
Corey, that's the game.
Yeah, it's going to show what the team's made of too, from a discipline standpoint. Have they made any growth? Have they had any growth since that Utah game when it comes to pre-snap penalties? And I think overall, just being able to battle adversity, not if you go down 14-0, not getting too down on yourself, being able to slowly battle back. And yeah, like you said, I think, what is it, 4 o'clock for that kickoff, I believe so. Yeah.
Wait, Vanderbilt. Yeah. By the way, Corey rocking the Detroit Lions hat. I hope that doesn't bring bad vibes to the bad mojo to Gator Nation. Okay.
No, yeah.
All right. Look, Corey, Lucas asks, any guys we can flip? We mentioned some guys earlier. To me, the guys to really watch, I mean, yeah, Jeremiah Smith, obviously you want that one. But look, that's a tall task. Let's just be totally honest. And you're not exactly lighting up the scoreboard right now, and you're not exactly putting up super impressive passing numbers. So that's gonna be a hard sell. All right. Because for Jeremiah Smith, it's a gigantic leap of faith. Here's what we would do if you were here. Okay. But other schools can sell proof of concept. Ohio State's got all those receivers in the NFL. FSU's throwing the heck out of the ball. And Miami seems to be doing better, they are doing better offensively. So it's going to be a tough sell. But to me, the two guys to watch, Corey, DeAndre Robinson. All right, DeAndre Robinson, the 4-star. I got a bug flying in front of me. 4-star defensive tackle from Orlando Jones, committed to Texas. And then 4-star cornerback Jameer Grimsley, the Alabama commit from Tampa Catholic. I think Florida is legitimately battling hard and in the conversation with those two guys. Would you agree with that? Is there any other flip candidate?
I think realistic flip candidates, Keith, I think those are definitely the two guys. And I think with Alabama, too, obviously, they're ranked, inside the top 10, having a good year as always, but it's not their typical dominant year. He was in attendance for the USF game when USF battled them for 4 quarters. And not saying that's something that's going to stick in his mind, but if you're going to try to flip an Alabama commit, this is probably the year you probably have the best opportunity to do so. But also, this kid loved Florida growing up. Obviously, he has family members that obviously still like Florida and still follow the program. I think it's just going to go down to seeing that growth. I think, like we noted at the top of the show, I think a lot of kids entered the season knowing that it was going to be a rebuilding process. It wasn't going to be pretty at all times. But as long as you show that growth, you're not getting blown out and you're competitive in these big, high-profile games. Georgia's another one. I mean, we talk about South Carolina, but we all know in the Southeast how many guys Florida and Georgia are battling for year in and year out. If Florida goes out and lays an egg and gets dominated by Georgia, that could be another one that could have a big effect on this class. So it's going to be interesting. The second half of the season is going to be interesting.
All right, before we get to more questions here, more discussion, more of our chatter. Actually, we never even got to your level of commitment story, Corey. If you like what we're doing, hit the like button, hit the subscribe button, leave a comment, tell a friend. We're trying to grow the YouTube channel. Look, when we get this thing up to 10,000 or so subscribers, that's going to really help us get more big name guests. We're going to have, it'll help with our travel budget. It's just doing a lot of great things for us. And also, if I could point out, GatorsOnline.com right now, $1 get your foot in the door. $1 for 1 month of all the best team and recruiting insight and intel. And also what we believe is the best message board community for Gator Nation. And we've got, hey, look, some of our insiders are coming out of the woodworks. We got Casey's back. I know a lot of you know who he is. So that's significant. Insiders really do make a board. Somebody pointed out once, Corey, they said, we understand that you guys as reporters can't always, you've got sources. You can't just be blabbing everything. Well, insiders are invaluable to what we do. They provide a great service to our message board, and we got a growing community. So we hope everybody can check that out. All right, Corey, James Williams, who I think, James, you've asked a bunch of questions the last few weeks. So thank you very much. Corey, do you still feel good about LJ McCrae as his commitment is approaching? That's the 5-star defensive lineman. By the way, Corey, I'm glad he asked you that question and not me. I'll let you handle that. Yeah. LJ McCrae, Daytona Beach Mainland. What do you think, man? What do you think?
I think this one is so extremely close. I really believe as of right now, I don't even think LJ knows where he wants to go right now, and I believe that. I think right now, as it stands today, I like Florida just slightly over Georgia and FSU, but I just think as we get to the end of October, those 3 schools could be shuffled around a little bit. FSU gets an official visit here soon. They're the only school that's getting an in-season official visit. So he was blown away by the Tennessee game. So that's a good thing for Florida, that game environment. He told me when I went to Mainland last week that, man, you had to be there. You had to be there. I'm like, I was there. It was amazing. So that visit made a good impression to compare when he goes to FSU. Also, Auburn, too. They just got him on campus. But I think it's going to be a coin toss really towards the end. I think that FSU visit is going to play, a big deal. But Georgia, it's funny. FSU and Florida can get the most recent visits. But when I interviewed him about Georgia, too, it was kind of, hey, what is there to ask about Georgia? The proof's in the pudding. So you never know with that, too. And Keith, you mentioned it, too. Georgia's been buzzing for months with him.
Well, and Georgia, quite frankly, nobody wants to hear this. This was really where the downfall of Florida started. I don't want to say downfall. It's not like a crumbling of Rome. But when I go back to when a guy like Jalen Carter, the 5-star defensive lineman from Apopka, when he picked Georgia over Florida, and I was out of state. I was living up in Atlanta covering another school, and I thought, my God, that's a guy Florida. I mean, if you lost him to FSU, okay, FSU had a great history of defensive linemen. If you lost him to Miami, heck, that's the school Warren Sapp went to, Apopka High, okay? But by God, how are you letting Georgia come into your state 90 minutes away from an area that is 100% that is a Gator area, okay? And when stuff like that starts happening, that concerns you. Then obviously they picked up Jordan Hall, the big defensive lineman from Jacksonville last year. So that's a tough pill to swallow. All right, next, Brandon says, hey, this class is going to finish outside the top 10. Amir Jackson is about to decommit, and Lagway will soon as well. Well, Amir Jackson's going to be recruited till the end. I'm pretty sure that. Auburn's got 1 tight end commit. That's really the school to watch. There's some chatter out there that Auburn is either going to really wants to add a second tight end commit, or well, whatever. I'll just leave it at that. Auburn's all in on this guy. They're also after another tight end out of Utah as well. So we'll have to see how that shakes out. We've not heard any chatter about DJ Lagway wavering. He hasn't visited other schools. Now, if he's all of a sudden shows up at Texas A&M in a couple weeks, okay, then you're probably going to feel a little bit concerned. But we haven't heard anything that would make anyone think that that's possible. I mean, look, he knows he's coming into a situation where Florida's got a diminished quarterback room, and he's got the ability to play certainly in a package role in the first year, whether Graham Mertz is back or not. And by year 2, if he does the things he's supposed to do, then the job's probably his. He's probably the starting quarterback at the University of Florida. So I think he likes that situation. So
and there's a good chance that Lagway comes this weekend from what I'm told. And to have him come on campus after a loss like that, I mean, just to kind of get him around the staff, I think that's great timing and very important too.
Well, and I guess I'll just break this news here. I will be in Texas next week to spend some time with DJ Lagway. And by God, if I go out there and he I mean, are you kidding me? I have his dad pay for my plane ticket. But no, I'm kidding. They're great people to be around. And but again, we haven't heard anything. We haven't heard anything to suggest.
Who is the DB that you went to go see at the school and then they committed elsewhere?
That was Jordan Pride. Yeah, that was Jordan Pride, because people like you told me. No, I'm kidding. No, Jordan Pride was, all we thought Florida, A&M, but Florida. And I'm driving out there, and our good buddy Steve Wilfong at 24/7 Sports puts in a crystal ball pick while I'm a half hour away from the kid's school on a 7-hour drive or 6-hour drive to Texas A&M. And then the kid tells me, yeah, I'm going to A&M. I'm like, you couldn't have told me this last night, That
was your welcome back to the game.
Yeah, thanks, man. And stuff like that happens. I'll never forget driving from Atlanta all the way down to the Tallahassee area to watch a receiver named Nate Craig Myers, who was committed to Auburn. It was a 5-star at one point. And first game of his senior season, he's their big recruit. I'll go see him his first game. First play of the season is an end around. He tears his ACL. First play of the season after I drove. Obviously, I wasn't as worried about me as I was for him, but you drive all the way down there, middle of nowhere. I think they're playing in Madison County. Look, I love Madison, Florida. That's the middle of nowhere, okay? And I can say that because I've been there about 5 times for games. But, it's just kind of luck of the draw sometimes. But, all right, let's get to some more. Let's see here. Boy, Brandon, you are Miss Captain Negative today, I'll tell you. All right, Mr. Bird's back. He's visited multiple times talking about DJ Lagway. Nobody else is actively recruiting him that we know. Let's see here. All right, Liquid Flames. I'm not going to put every single post up there, Corey. Liquid Flames seems like bad luck that FSU, Miami, and Georgia and all our surrounding competitions started getting good as Napier was getting started. Well, I don't consider that bad luck. I consider that the fault of people of Florida, quite frankly. They're part of, they weren't good enough to keep those schools from making a rise. Now, look, Miami's got one quality win this year. Let's not go crazy yet. It was an impressive win. Yeah, look, I'm all about giving people credit when they deserve it. They beat Texas A&M at home, and they beat them into the ground. Okay, if Texas A&M ends up winning the SEC West, that win's going to look better and better. Florida State's got one really good win over LSU. Clemson pretty much handed them the game. A win's a win, especially on the road. You take them any way you can get. I've seen Florida teams get some good breaks and win national championships. So it's the way it goes. But if you're Florida, you can't really worry about those other schools, Corey. You do what you do. You keep putting out a product. You keep trying to improve, and you keep selling your vision. In year 2, you can still sell your vision. You don't need as much proof of concept. In year 3, they got to see something. They got to see something. So next year is, I don't care how hard the schedule is, and the powers that be don't care how hard the schedule is, and the recruits don't care how hard the schedule is. If they look up and you're 4-4, ain't gonna happen. Because
what's crazy
at that point, they're expecting. I'm sorry. No, go ahead. What were you saying, Corey?
No, I was just saying it's just nuts going to next year. Already be his 3rd season at Florida. I'm just saying, I don't know how this time is just flying by. And I think you said it perfectly, Keith. I think you hit on the nail about saying year 2, you can still sell your vision, what we're going to be. But year 3, as in any coach, like you said, you got to have some results on the field to back that up.
They got to see it. I mean, if God forbid they don't do anything on the road this year, the next year you got to start winning on the road. I mean, there has to be Billy Napier said it this week. Hey, I'm in the building. I see the progress. And for a guy that I really like, that just doesn't cut it with a lot of people. But again, look, it won't cut it next year. Right now, sure, they're 5 games into the second season. Look, after they beat Tennessee, everybody was back on the bandwagon. Okay? Things change fast. Kentucky very well could be pretty good. That might be a 10-win team. We might look back at that loss later on and not be as ashamed that Florida was laid such an egg there. We don't know. Things change, all right? But they got to win this week. Look, if they have to win this week, okay, that is a no-doubter, okay? But to take the next step, they've got to then win the next week because you don't have too many more road opportunities after that. You've got Georgia and Jacksonville. Boy, that's a tough ask, the number 1 team in the country. You then go to LSU. God, that might be a night game. That's going to be difficult. You then go to Missouri, okay? Well, Missouri's putting up some pretty dang good numbers this year, and it's going to be cold up there in November, and it'll probably be a noon game. So apparently the Florida players didn't like playing the noon game last week. I mean, I guess they didn't like the 7:30 game or whatever, the night game out in Utah either because they stunk it up out there too.
I don't feel good about any of the road games.
No, I think South Carolina is the one you feel best about. And so we're talking about this from the prism of recruiting. And get that win, 5-2. Go up there. Beat Shane Beamer, who, by the way, is recruiting pretty well. You got some potential recruiting battles with him. Jordan Seaton, the 5-star offensive tackle that's coming in this week. That's one of the schools he's looking at. All right, Corey, level of commitment. Projecting the strength of each Gators offensive pledge. Who should fans be concerned about on the offensive side of the ball? We talked about one, Amir Jackson. Of the offensive commits for the Florida Gators, who are the ones they should be most concerned about? And then how concerned should they be?
Yeah, I think, Keith, we did a good job explaining at the front end. We're not saying these guys are going to flip anytime soon, but, Amir Jackson obviously is one we're keeping close tabs on because of the Auburn visit. But, Kyan Daniels, the running back commit, he says all the good things about Florida. He hasn't really said, I'm going to visit other schools, but it makes you think with him having such a good senior year, he's from Mississippi. In years past, getting a top count Mississippi is never easy. It's kind of like the same reputation in LSU when you go to Louisiana, getting a top kid, unless you're Alabama or Georgia. But I'm kind of keeping an eye on him just because Mississippi State and Ole Miss are going to keep getting in the picture, and obviously the opportunity to stay home. It's the same thing. I mean, right now he plans to get back for the FSU game, right? That's the only thing scheduled. But we'll see what happens later on. He's going to be early enrollee too. I think those are the only 2 guys on offense, man, that I'm truthfully worried about. A lot of the Isaiah Williams, Tawaski Abrams, offensive line commits. I mean, pretty much down the board on the offensive side of the ball, everyone said they're locked in and set to early enroll.
All right, I'm trying to look up some stuff while I'm listening to you. I had myself on mute. Okay, so I'm going to look at – oops, what's going on here? Trying to look up stuff. Alabama, Corey, can you look this up? Because it's doing it where the ad's coming up on me. I know that they're still recruiting, and I have a point for bringing this up. I know they're still recruiting the running back, Kevin Riley, out of Tuscaloosa, who's committed to Miami. I believe they're still recruiting him. Well, what if they get vibes that he's sticking with Miami, right? So if you're Alabama, you say, well, we still want one more running back. And West Point, Mississippi, for those of you that don't know, is right next to Starkville, and Starkville's 90 minutes from Tuscaloosa. So my point being, I'm not saying necessarily watch out for Alabama, but there is a trickle-down effect too, right? There's a trickle-down effect too. I've heard, I don't want to say, but I've heard there's a very good running back committed to an ACC school that potentially could flip to an SEC school, okay? That opens up some things. I mean, so you just never know who's going to come and try and poach your guys. That's why you build relationships with the kid, his family, his coaching staff. You hope your NIL stuff's in order. It's a never-ending fight. It really is. I'm going to point out today, Corey, also some good news. We're going to go for about 10 more minutes. If you like what we're doing, hit the like button, subscribe button, leave a comment. 2 Florida commits. One of them you just mentioned, Kanan Daniels, the other one being Jamonte Waller. They're both from the state of Mississippi. Today they were and I got the hiccups, I got coughs. Today, they were both selected to play in the Mississippi-Alabama or Alabama-Mississippi All-Star game. It's a big deal. It's a game they've been playing for decades, And congrats to both those guys. That is a legit game with some hard-hitting guys. It used to be fun to go to, Corey, because the college coaches could go. They were all there, and it was just, God, it was so much fun. You'd be hanging out with guys like Lance Thompson or whatever, and it was really fun. But congratulations to both those guys. They're having outstanding seasons. All right, let's get to some more questions here, and then we will wrap it up. Lucas says, how many wins do we need to finish with the top 6 class? My gut, Corey, says as long as Florida's 6-6, they'll probably be fine because they're going to be adding guys too. Yeah, you may lose a guy here or there, but you also may add some guys. You're right.
I was going to say 6-6, 7 wins, right in that neighborhood. Yeah.
I think it's 7-5. You're like, hey, you know what? That's progress. This schedule was tough. This was a team with all these newcomers and all these transfers and freshmen. You know, I think you can live with that. All right. Next question, S. Beck. I hope I'm reading that right. If the Gators are able to get Jeremiah Smith, the 5-star receiver, it was strictly because he wants to play with DJ Lagway. I would say that'd be a huge part of it. I think that'd be a huge part of it. But look, it's an in-state school. His family, they're strong South Florida ties. They understand. They know what it means to be able to go to the University of Florida. Like, that's a big deal to a lot of people, and I think the family understands that. He's solidly committed to Ohio State right now. He's going to sign in December. He'll have a final decision then. I'm sure FSU will get him back to a game. I'm sure Miami will get him to a game. I'm sure Ohio State's going to get him to a game. But the plan is for him to be back at Florida.
I believe he's at Miami this weekend.
Yeah, and that makes sense. Yeah. The plan is for him to be back at the Florida State game. What you hope is, if you're Florida, you hope that Florida and Florida State, hit some roadblocks and you don't want FSU putting up a bunch of passing numbers. Even though you could, if you're a Florida fan, you're saying, wait a second, their quarterback's going to be gone. They're going to have all new guys. But again, it's that proof of concept thing. They're not just saying what they're going to do in the passing game with you. They're showing it right now. And I think that's resonating with Jeremiah, quite frankly. All right, let's see here. Blah, 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 blah. All right, Liquid Flames, 24/7 has the 23 class 5th and ahead of everyone, blah, blah, blah. Let's see. I think it will be. Okay, well, I shouldn't put that one up there. But all right, next one, Greedy. Any update on any of the other offensive lineman recruits? Well, obviously, Florida, as you know, Greedy, Florida's got 4. You get this of your 4 offensive linemen committed. Fletcher Westfall is a 4-star. Marcus Maskell is a 4-star with on 3. Fletcher's a tackle. Marcus is a guard/tackle. Then you've got 3 stars, Noah Portageon. I hope I'm pronouncing that right, from Germany, Project, and Mike Williams, an offensive tackle from Baltimore, another 3-star. So you want to add one more. Big one's coming in this weekend. That's Fletcher Westfall. It's Jordan Seaton, the 5-star. Florida's also recruiting Favor. Is that how you pronounce it? Favor Edwin?
Yeah.
Georgia. But here's the thing. He just visited Auburn the other day and told reporters after the game he's Auburn and Clemson right now. Florida probably, as Corey can explain, Florida probably could have gotten him earlier in the year, but wasn't ready to make a huge move. Anybody else on the offensive line, Corey? You got the kid out in California that's committed to San Jose State?
Yeah, so he's back on the market now. Decommitted for San Jose State, but now it's Arizona's only OV he has scheduled. Plans to get out to Florida in early December, but another kind of one of those project type who have a lot of athleticism, a high ceiling. But I think with Florida, and that's why Seaton's so important. Florida has a lot of guys in this class that have a high ceiling, big guys that are versatile, but they need that big fish along the offensive line. And to me, it was a no-brainer to say Seaton's the most important recruit left on the board. And traditionally, you don't see true freshmen ever really kind of go on the field and start, right away. But in recent years, you're starting to see it a little bit more. I think Seaton's in that group where I feel like where Florida's at offensively along the offensive line. I feel like he could step right in at right tackle or at guard if needed next year. I just think they need that big fish. And, this weekend, the red carpet is going to be rolled out at probably every minute on that.
Yeah, and we know he just visited Tennessee, and it looks like they're going to get him back on campus for an official visit. He's already officially visited Alabama, and a few times in recent months has called Alabama his top school. That's a big one. But, I tell you what, I just think I'm looking at Florida's offensive line right now, and it hadn't been very good this season. That's an area where Florida absolutely has to make a huge improvement next year on the field. And so that's why I think you're going to see Florida sign these 4 guys. Hopefully, if you're Florida, add a 5th guy. but they're going to have to make a big move in the portal this next offseason. And quite
Yeah,
frankly,
they don't get C, and they have to get a big fish.
Yeah, and they did this season too. I mean, they had the misfortune of getting the one transfer, Keontae Gooden, I guess. Am I pronouncing his name right? That had to leave the program due to a sickness in the family. So it wasn't an ideal situation, but you don't want to go into next season with the similar offensive line that you have right now situation, because you'll get eaten alive against, next year's schedule looks tougher than this year's schedule. So anyway, all right, Sanford, says, thanks for the show. Greedy, are we still looking for a second running back in this class? Yes. Jaden Baugh, still, he's not communicating a lot with me lately. That's the Arkansas commit in Atlanta. Yeah. Still recruiting Jarrett Gibson, the Texas commit, who's from Gainesville, was once committed to the Gators. I know nobody's making a big deal out of that, and Texas seems to be comfortable, but he has visited Florida a couple times. And if you start getting that vibe, I really do feel comfortable. It sure is easier just to drive right down the road and go to school here than get on a plane and go to Texas. And he's very close with the running backs coach at Texas, Tashard Choice, the former Georgia Tech star. So that's going to be difficult. We still think new names are going to emerge. I mean, it is still just the first week of October. Evaluations are ongoing.
And then you can also get a portal guy to go with Daniel. That's right. So, yeah.
All right. How do you guys feel about Jordan Seaton? I need to see how this visit goes. We've heard, I think both of us have heard NIL is a big part of the equation in his recruitment. So, Corey, how do you feel about him?
It's a wait and see, man. I mean, we put him early in the mock class over the summer, but we call that an early mock class for a reason. I think Alabama right now, if I had to put a bet down, I think they're probably the front runner. But Florida has a big opportunity this weekend. But I think there's so many schools involved here that we got to see how these visits play out first.
All right. Next question, with the battle for LJ McCrae, if Florida loses, are there any other defensive ends they're pursuing?
Dalen Evans, but
Dalen Evans, the Texas A&M commit from Texas. I think that's where you would then see Florida start circling back on some guys committed to other schools. And here's the good thing, Greedy. Look, you don't want to lose LJ McCrae, but theoretically his recruitment should be over by late October, early November. That gives you plenty of time. That should give you 5 or 6 weeks, you would think, to kind of regroup before signing day. Now, what you can't have is the double whammy of losing him and have a guy like Nasir Johnson end up somewhere else. Now, again, we've not heard – a few weeks ago we heard Georgia was still sniffing around with Nasir Johnson. So the fact that he's going there, Corey, does that mean Georgia doesn't feel as good about Mekhi Barrow? I mean, there's always a lot of different dynamics in play.
Real quick on Dalen Evans, too. I talked to him yesterday. Say he's definitely coming to another Florida game. He says that, and he said right now Florida and Alabama are the two schools he's still considering. And I asked him why Florida still, and he said basically the relationships are still very strong and communication consistent. But going to A&M this weekend, I believe they host Alabama. So
I don't see
him flipping.
Yeah, I mean, that just seems like, I don't know. He was saying all the right things this summer, and apparently Texas Christian, TCU, felt like at one point they were going to flip him too, and he hadn't done it.
I believe too. Yeah,
he hadn't flipped anybody. I'm not ready to buy on that one yet. Yep. All right. Yep. Next question for Corey. I'm glad you're getting all the good ones here. Is the staff putting special emphasis on any special position based on the on-field results recently, or is it the same approach?
It's basically the same approach, but I think overall offensive line, I know they're, putting emphasis to seat and saying, hey, we're building, and obviously there's a lot of stuff to be excited about, but we need that big fish on the offensive line, and you can see it that we could definitely use you, and we could use you today. So I think overall it's not too much of a change, but I know obviously they're going to be showing Seaton that, hey, you can come in and help us right away.
All right, here's an interesting comment here. DeAndre, excuse me. Sorry about that. Guys, I'm from Birmingham, and I'm hearing some good news about Jordan Ross, even though he's committed to Tennessee. That's the 4-star edge. Florida kind of was hot and heavy on him for a while, and then sort of went, kind of really put some focus elsewhere, I think is the best way to say it. And it wasn't anything personal, and it wasn't that they didn't like him, I don't think. It was basically, if you look at where Florida's commitments are right now, they don't really need anybody at his position. They have bigger needs at other places. You've got basically three guys in this class right now that can play edge. Amaris Williams. Now, if you lose him, maybe that changes things. But Amaris Williams, Jamonte Waller is going to be an inside linebacker / edge because he can get after the quarterback. and then Kendall Jackson. So I think it was more of that. I don't think he flat out. I mean, at the end, Corey, we were both told Florida really wasn't pushing at all. And again, that's when you say that, people think, oh my God, that's a slight. Why is he saying this about my kid or my player or my favorite player? Florida had a bunch of guys. They still do. You look at their linebackers / edges committed right now. There's not a huge need there, quite frankly.
Even Jamonte Waller as an undersized edge guy, you could put him there on third down. So I mean,
yeah. All right, I think that will probably do it. We appreciate it. Hey, DeAndre, thank you for the information. We'll look into that. How about that? I'll make you a promise. We're gonna look into that. If you like what we're doing, hit the like button, hit the subscribe button. Please tell a friend. Let's get this thing rolling. Leave a comment. Corey likes you to grade his looks, his beard, his figure. He's really a diva. So, leave a comment there. Go to GatorsOnline.com. $1, get your foot in the door. $1, get you 1 month. 1 month of Gators Online, all the team intel, all the recruiting scoop, the best message board community in Gator Nation. And listen, we're going to be doing these things a lot. We enjoy the interaction with you guys. And that's it. That'll do it for this edition of Gators Online Live Recruiting Edition, Scoop Edition. We'll talk to everybody soon. Have a good homecoming. And if you're going up to Gainesville for the weekend, for the game, have fun, be safe, try not to lose your mind at the game. And we'll do it again soon. We'll see you guys in the very near future. Take care, everybody.